I am actually being sarcastic. Did that come across as sarcastic?
Eavesdroppin.
Hello, Michelle.
Hello, hello. Maybe I'm going to be the one to sing.
It's about bloody time. I'm glad to hear you singing. That's a beautiful sound. La 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 la.
I actually think I sang a little bit too much last episode.
There was a lot of singing.
Yeah, but it's because you didn't know the songs.
No, I didn't. And then I went on to listen to them. Ladies and gentlemen of the eavesdroppers out there, we're talking about last week's episode. If you haven't heard it, we did a real-life deep dive into a new series called Gone Too Soon.
Gone. G-A-W-N.
And it was Avicii and there's conspiracies around Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones' death. Now, I don't know a single Avicii song. I did listen to Hey Brother, and I quite liked it.
Yes, of course, it's got a little country thing going on. But what about the other two big hits?
No idea. It passed me by.
How?
Perhaps I was giving birth, having children when all this was happening.
I mean, I don't even have a car, and I heard that on the radio somehow. Every time I was in a supermarket, a car, God knows where, a shopping mall, everywhere, every store in the world had those songs on.
Despite you constantly singing those songs to me, it did not ring a bell. And then when I listened to them, I was like, oh, yes, I guess Michelle did a pretty good job of the instrumental songs by Avicii. But enough of that. I want to talk to you a little bit about... Oh, but first we should say... Welcome, eavesdroppers. I'm Geordie.
And I'm Michelle, and this is Eavesdroppin, the comedy podcast.
It's comedy. You laugh, you cry, you throw up.
You do, and we talk about dark things, but in a light-hearted way.
Is that okay? Is it okay to do that, guys? Let us know. Are we insensitive, or are we just normal? You tell us.
I was going to say, you can tell us, but if you don't like it, we're not the podcast for you, because that's what we do. It's what we do. Dark with a comedic twist, I guess.
Yeah, there's plenty of it about, because if you don't laugh, you cry. And we don't want to be crying, so we're laughing instead. How about that? Grab that.
Yes. So you were saying something about a previous episode.
Yes. 2 weeks ago, we did One Taste. You told me all about this MLM stroke cult called One Taste.
Stroke. Did you have to say the word stroke?
I did have to say stroke because it is relevant, which our lovely listener Charlene sent in to us. Thank you, Charlene. We love you. And it was something I'd never heard of before. But guess what, Michelle? It was massive, as you probably knew because you did the research. And we've had a couple of people write in. We had Ray, dear Ray, who sent in another podcast. He listens to other podcasts, Michelle.
How dare you, Ray? How dare you?
I know
You're cheating on me.
Faithful. He sent this podcast, which I think I might be a devotee of now after listening to it. It's fantastic. It's Love and Radio by a man called Nick van der Kolk, who I wondered, and I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet, is he Bessel van der Kolk's son or relative? Because Bessel van der Kolk is a Dutch psychotherapist, I believe, or he works a lot in trauma. He did that book, The Body Keeps the Score.
I've never heard of him. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. Well, this episode of Love and Radio is called Upper Left. And it's about the first-hand experiences within the MLM, which I'm going to call it because that's what I think it is at the end of the day, which is called One Taste that Michelle told us about last week. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen. Then another listener, 2 weeks ago, that's right, another listener wrote in with their own experiences. And I'm saying there because I do not want to indicate who this listener is.
Are you joking?
They happen to know of first-hand friends and some very famous household names who actually threw a lot of cash to be fingered and do the stroking in this MLM.
My God. I thought, my God, we've got an eavesdropper who basically got fingered by a monk, maybe, or just by some randoms. Oh, my God.
A friend of theirs did, and other friends, very close friends and acquaintances did. And I cannot tell you because it's shocking, and for legal reasons, I just can't say anything else. I'm sorry.
Oh, my God. So are her friends traumatized by this?
I don't know where they stand. I would say, like most Hollywood folk, they have probably just put it down to experience and moved on. And quickly done an advert to recoup the cash that they've spent.
Well, exactly. And
for a quick OM.
And do you know what? They probably processed it by thinking, I just put this in the box of experiences to draw on as a Hollywood type.
Well, one thing that Charlene, I know in her email did say, and you didn't touch upon, was that our very favourite wellness magician and sometime actor, Gwyneth Paltrow, was involved in this and
she was?
fingering.
Okay.
I'm sure that's what the information was that came to us, said.
I didn't hear that Gwyneth was involved.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I thought it was something Gwyneth
It's possible.
could have been involved with because, she's got the vagina candle. She loves all that shit. I'm sure she knew about it. Whether or not she got fingered by a random, I don't know. I cannot attest to that.
Perceive a world in which, listening to that story, Michelle, I just cannot see myself ever falling for something like that, or even considering allowing myself to be in that position.
But Geordie, they were targeting women with sexual trauma who were vulnerable and looking for healing. They ended up in a fucking cult.
They may have been targeting those people, but judging by what our source tells me, people who weren't even affected by those things, Michelle, were also drawn into the MLM because it was a craze.
I think it's a little bit like NXIVM. Smart people who maybe thought, I can get something more out of this. Maybe I'll find my upper left quadrant at the 1 o'clock position and get my hubby, my boyfriend, whoever to finger me better. I don't know. Maybe there were other things involved here. Or I do think that sometimes people go through a period in their lives, I say this all the time, where they're a little bit lost and they are easy prey for people who come up with the great marketing jingles and slogans like One Taste had.
Like people who are early adopters of trends, I suppose, then you don't really have time to scope it out and to see, is this a good idea? Am I going to regret this in the future? Oops.
I think it starts off as one thing and perhaps ends up as another thing. It's an evolution with these groups, and certainly when you look at NXIVM, they thought they were signing up for well-being and success training and all that kind of stuff. These people thought, okay, this is a new way to meditate, but it's sexy too. Maybe I want to have a little one taste of that.
One taste.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for writing in, Random Eavesdropper, Anonymous Eavesdropper.
And Ray.
And Ray too, bloody cheat. But I do love a good podcast, Rex, so I'm going to link that up on the Patreon for our lovely Patreon subscribers who a couple of weeks ago, after you had been to Glastonbury, saw our very own version of us from many years ago in memory of Glastonbury. You haven't been on Patreon, have you?
No. Tell me what's going on.
From one of your birthday parties, we're doing SOS.
Oh. So who saw that?
I don't know. Anyone who's on Patreon can see it.
It's up there. I see what you're saying. Yes, on our Patreon. And you do have to pay a little bit to get into this particular cafe to buy us a coffee.
Yes.
You buy us a coffee at this cafe, but you then get treated with extra podcast material monthly and little bits and bobs. Like, for example, what Michelle just said, which is we were in a band, we formed a band called the Bush Family Band, which was essentially going to be Kate Bush covers for a raft of 40th birthdays that happened when that was going on. And it was family members, like my grown-up son is the guitarist, Michelle is in the band, and we just do covers, and we got dressed up in between every song so that we looked a little bit like Sting, or we looked a little bit like Pat Benatar, etc.
Or ABBA.
Or Kiss. And I do want to point out that I'm pregnant in every year that we did these videos.
I also put up a lovely montage of pictures of Annie's sprinkles so you could see what she looked like. So it's all over
but
on
not her vulva.
Not the vulve, no.
Good.
There's no spready pics. It's lovely face pics, portraits, you might say. So, like I said, all over on the Patreon.
Fabulous. Go and have a look.
Patreon.com/eavesdroppin.
Eavesdroppin.
No G.
I feel like it's time to just add a little jingle here for Ray, because we haven't played that one for a while, and we moved past the segue where I was going to say, let's have a jingle for Ray, but let's have it here anyway.
We've been to IKEA and Michelle was still in there. We were waiting sort of 20 minutes. Little bitch.
Telerex.
Oh.
Telerex. Now...
Yes, Michelle, you gave us a great few Rex last week. Did you watch any of them?
I tried. Yes, I did. Now, Andreas and we were at a bit of a loose end, and I said, hey, I'm going to go to the Patreon, look at these telewracks, see what's going down. I made him watch the Celine Dion documentary. Look, I know Eavesdropper Steph gave us this rec. She said it was great. She had some tears. I couldn't get through it.
Not for you?
Not for me. Not for me.
What was the offending parts that pushed you away?
Well, Celine Dion, number one. But also just the way it was put together, it wasn't well done. You know, they had unfettered access to this reasonably sort of reclusive person who's gone through this really traumatic disease.
She's got stiff person syndrome, whatever that is.
I actually thought that was a joke. I thought it was a joke, but it's a real thing, and she can't sing. And she gave an example actually in the documentary where, you know, that song, and it touched me like this.
Yes.
And she tried to sing that, and it was like, and it touched me like this.
Oh no.
She's gone. She's destroyed.
Oh, dear,
like
poor
her
woman.
career is over. She really struggles to walk and do all these things.
God.
It's absolutely heartbreaking, the disease, but unfortunately, I just couldn't get into it. So
Yeah,
but I love a rec because, you know, it makes you watch things that you wouldn't ordinarily watch. However, I do have a very good rec. I'm only 2 eps in.
So you might still be wrong.
Might still be wrong. For our Australian listeners, it's over on SBS, and it's a Swedish series with English subtitles called Evil. It's set in the 40s, 50s, in a really, really harsh, horrible boarding school.
Oh.
And it's all about this kid and what he goes through. And I'm gripped. Can't wait to watch the next episode tonight. And when I feel really excited, I know it's a good sign.
Okay, that's exciting, isn't it?
Evil, it's called.
Evil. Well, regarding Rex, I had my cousin here last night and my husband. We were looking for something to watch, and I was like, what about Brat? It's not called Brat, it's called Brats. And it was a recommendation from Safka, and it is the Andrew McCarthy directed documentary about I forgot to say it last week when I was recommending it.
The Brat Pack.
The Brat Pack.
Oh my God, I would love to see that.
My cousin's really young. He's actually the son of my cousin. So he's too young to enjoy it or to know who the people are. And Paddy, no. It was a flat no from him. Not really into the Brat Pack. So that's one for myself. Actually, I thought you and I might watch it when you were over, but you didn't make it.
I did not make it. And fuck you, EasyJet, for fucking up my life. You fucking cancelled my fucking flight.
If you would like to pay for some promotion, we'll do a lovely ad for you and pay for some tickets for Michelle.
You owe me, you bastards. Yeah. That could be one for us. I would love to watch that, but I do think you're probably going to snuggle up with a cocktail and watch it on your own before I get there.
I probably will. Sorry.
Oh, wonderful, Rex. Well, great.
Speaking of films, you know, Michelle, a lot of horror films about hauntings are usually based on true stories or reported to be true stories, right?
Yeah.
Well, this week I had a little root around in horror stories and where their true origins come from. Mm-hmm. And I found something which I really hope we haven't talked about on this podcast before, because listeners, Michelle and I, we have a lot of conversations, some of which are recorded just for your listening pleasure. So now and again, we do forget about things that we've already covered. And I will be touching on things that we have talked about in the past. And it is a very similar thing this week to something that I did recently, which was, you remember when I talked to you about The Watcher, that Netflix show starring Bobby Cannavale and Naomi Watts?
And you did a lot of talking like this.
I did the Watcher's voice, which was fabulous. I know a lot of people enjoyed that. Well, this week I am going to be talking about, it's a movie that starred Virginia Madsen, so you know it's quality because she made a lot of great choices. Mm-hmm. Didn't she, in her career? I am actually being sarcastic. Did that come across as sarcastic?
Not really, because I was like, okay. Because after Twin Peaks, because it was Twin Peaks, right? She was in
Was she in that?
Virginia Madsen, was she? Maybe that was someone else. But I think she had one good thing and then a nosedive.
Candyman. She was in Candyman.
What the fuck's Candyman?
It's a horror film. Oh. She was in something called The Haunting of Connecticut.
I'm looking her up.
And this was based on a true tale. What?
Virginia Madsen. Right, I'm just IMDbing this bitch.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll just explain to the listeners who may still be with me, I'm not sure. My information is from an article from All That's Interesting by a lady called Amber Morgan, and it was published first in 2023, then updated this year in March 2024. And it details the Snedecker family, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in 1986, when the family decided to move house. Do you want to know what music was top 3 in that time?
I would love to know.
Fabulous. Well, in 1986, I Googled it, and we have such classics as Prince's Kiss, which everybody knows. I don't want my extra kiss. That one.
You say everyone knows that. However, I remember being in an office full of people a few years younger than me and just saying, oh, yeah, Prince. And they're like, who?
Who?
And I was like, Prince. They're like,
wow.
Who's that? No idea.
Good God. Well, I chose songs that I thought people would be familiar with, such as West End Girls.
Love that
Pet
one.
Shop Boys.
Love that one.
From an eastern town to da-da-da. That one.
Eastern boys and Western girls.
And then the third song I chose was You Might As Well Face It, You're Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer. But then also another one popped up, and I had to include it because it was the most ridiculous song by the most ridiculous band. Do you remember a band called Mr. Mister?
Yes. Broken Wings.
I don't know that one. Oh, take these broken
Yeah.
wings. Well, it's not that song. It's Kyrie, listen down the road that I must travel.
Really?
Terrible.
I mean, that was actually like a big tune.
Yeah, it was in the top 3 of that year.
Wow. Great stuff. And this was in the 80s.
Who'd call your band Mr. Mister?
Mr. Mister.
Stupid.
They did. And they had big fucking hits. So it's not a great name.
So I'm returning now to 1986. This family, the Snedecker family, they needed somewhere to rent that was closer to UConn Hospital because their son, Philip, was being treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer.
Not nice.
No. So their new home at 208 Meriden Avenue, Southington or Southington, I don't know, Connecticut, was conveniently located. However, 2 years later, the family left the house amidst stories of shocking paranormal activity.
Tell me what that is.
I will tell you. I will get there. First, I'm going to describe the family. It was a family that consisted of Mum Carmen, her husband Alan, and then they had 4 children. Philip, the one who was poorly, Bradley, Alan Jr., and Jennifer. And also included in the family was Carmen's niece Tammy, who lived with them. Philip, who I said had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at a young age, often had to travel from the family's home previously to moving to this place to get treatment, and it would be long and difficult for him. So they just thought this is a much better idea. They found a house closer to the hospital so he wouldn't have to suffer through long and painful car rides anymore. The family then found this house, they settled in, it was a rental, and the kids excitedly chose all their rooms. Then Carmen, the mum, made a really disturbing discovery one day in the home's basement quite early on.
Okay.
She found, amongst dusty boxes and old furniture, funerary items such as
ashes,
embalming equipment. Not ashes.
Oh.
They didn't say ashes. Embalming equipment and other items that kind of indicated that this home had previously been run as a mortuary.
Right. Can I just say,
Yuck, right?
Who leaves shit behind in a house? Like
people who left in a hurry? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think you're allowed to. I think the real estate would be like, clean your shit up and get it out.
This is 1986, so perhaps the restrictions weren't as firm.
Maybe. I just wouldn't leave shit in a house.
No, you wouldn't, would you?
Especially not creepy shit like that. Blah.
So according to a 2002 documentary which is about this case, it's called A Haunting in Connecticut, in case you'd like to find it, Carmen said in the documentary that she had no idea that the home had once been a funeral parlour because when she was first inspecting the property with the estate agent, she couldn't get into the basement because on that day they were showing her around. The renovators had blocked the doorway with building materials.
Oh, how convenient.
I still would have said, can I look in there?
Yeah. Can I see if there are any bodies in there?
Can we move that to one side? But she ended up getting confirmation that the house was indeed a funeral home by contacting the home's owner, a man called Darrell Kern, who stated that the property was once the Hallahan Funeral Home and had been in operation for decades.
Now, you know that actually, I have lived above a funeral parlour.
Yes, that's right, you have.
Very quiet below.
Never occurred to me. Yeah.
Well, I think they didn't store the bodies there. I think it was more a meet and greet, have a look at these caskets in the back kind of situation.
Don't know about that.
Well, we always had, the hearses show up.
Which means they were collecting the bodies, darling. Sorry, they were there.
The hearse was full.
Well, why would they make a pit stop by the head office? I don't understand why they would do that. Especially if that meant driving into a very busy, hectic downtown area of London.
Well,
no, I think they originated from there.
I never saw anything going in. And believe me, I looked a lot. I never saw a casket going out. I never saw bodies going in. But I didn't have a problem with it. Obviously, I prefer not to have had dead people underneath my bedroom.
Well, they're probably a bit quieter, as you said, than the living ones.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in my part of town in London. But yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. Put it that way. Either way.
Okay. So Kern, who is the landlord, said he told the family about this before they moved in. And this is according to an article from 1992 in the Hartford Courant. Courant? How would you say that? Courant. Courant. Courant.
I don't know.
Despite this, kids Philip and Bradley, who are the two older ones, decided to make the basement their bedroom. And it appealed to them because it was really spacious. And they were the oldest kids, so they wanted to have a den-type space to inhabit.
Yeah, but bedroom? Really? Do you know what? Maybe they also were young and thinking, bit macabre.
We don't care about dead people.
It's kind of cool.
Maybe.
They could tell their friends, people were dead down here.
Well, they could tell their friends that because Philip and Bradley apparently slept in the casket display room down the hall from the embalming room. And not only was there embalming equipment found there, but also images of the deceased. I don't know why.
What the fuck?
I know.
That is bad breaking of confidentiality here. That's terrible.
Exactly. Well, Carmen said there were a couple of photos in the home, but there were many more toe tags and a head tag. There were other personal items of the deceased that were left behind as well.
Oh, my God.
I know.
Smorgasbord.
Oh,
sorry.
Why did you have to say that? So paranormal activity in the home started the night the family moved into the house, mostly targeting poor sickly Philip more than any other family member. And other family members were included in the hauntings, and activity would escalate in intensity the longer that they lived there. Carmen said, for example, this is a famous thing that was in the documentary, she said she'd been mopping the floor one day when the water turned to blood and it gave off this acrid smell of rotting flesh.
Oh, my God. Her mop bucket water turned to blood.
She said...
Very Carrie. This is scary.
She said the mop later was blood red. I mean, a deep red. It made my skin crawl. I started getting nervous that I was ruining the floor. Is that all you're worried about, Carmen? Jeez.
It's staining my oak.
Oh, no, I shouldn't do this. It's going to make a terrible stain. The most shocking claim, though, from both Carmen and Alan, and I tried very hard to find more info on this, was that unknown forces had raped and sodomized them in the time that they lived there.
No.
So at night they would wake up to being sexually molested by ghosties.
What, like having a ghost D up the bumhole?
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean...
A D up the B, even.
A D up the V. A ghosty D up the
ghosty
V.
D in the V. Honestly, this is Michelle's sexy algebra that she likes to include every episode. I'm just getting to grips with it myself, listeners.
But it's easy to understand, right?
What? The B and the D's and the V's?
A D and a V and a B and a...
Well, I think maybe you should draw up a little table of contents just for the listeners and pop it on the Patreon. So that's all I know about their rapes, if they did indeed happen. Yeah, obviously they didn't happen because it was in supernatural forces, so you can't see them, but they felt something. So I don't know more than that, really.
Yes.
I did want to know more. Trust me. It is shocking. But then even more upsetting for them was the fact that poor Philip, sickly Philip, his personality began to change. He'd become more irritable and short-tempered and different. And he would behave really cruelly towards the other children in the house. Terrible things like putting poor Bradley on a gurney and spinning him around until Bradley begged to stop. I mean, there was gurneys left in this house.
Fucking hell, I'm sorry, but why didn't the mum, Carmen, just go...
Get rid of
Fuck it, we are cleaning this shit up. Get the bin bags, put on the marigolds. We're cleaning up this fucking house.
Don't leave the gurney in the funeral parlour.
Get rid of the gurney.
But going back to Philip and his personality change, he also locked his brothers in chests and walked away. And then he attacked his cousin Tammy. And after that, that was it for the family. They had to send him to a hospital where he spent 45 days being treated, diagnosed with schizophrenia. And this was probably because Philip was explaining to the doctors the entities that he continually witnessed. So the doctors then noticed by looking through his meds, because obviously he's on a lot of meds with his cancer, that those medications wouldn't cause hallucinations or trigger any dormant schizophrenia illnesses. So they were at a loss as to what was going on here.
Possessed.
Well, the children said that they all saw strange people throughout the house.
Right.
They could see these entities, especially a man with long black hair.
Oh, there would have been a lot of dead people through that house. So it's not surprising.
Is it? Is it not surprising?
No, they're seeing ghosts.
That they see people?
They see lots of different ones. Not that surprising.
It's not surprising to you.
To me. But...
I find it quite surprising.
What?
I said I find it quite surprising.
Look, if there's going to be some...
You've just taken it as fact.
Well, I'm just saying if there's going to be some ghosts, a funeral home is kind of a...
Where they'll be.
It's like a cafe for dead people.
Well, they're an empty vessel. I mean, if you believe in that kind of stuff, they're already in an empty vessel. Usually, like if you go back to our famous psychic real estate agent, Hazel, she will often be in places where the loved ones have passed away in their homes.
Yes, and she will see
And that's where
them.
they hang around, yeah.
Yes.
But one got in a car with her one day, don't forget.
Yes, that's
Travelled to
right.
work.
Yeah, she was very, very annoyed by that.
Yeah.
It's not surprising if there's going to be ghosts anywhere that they're in a funeral home.
AKA the cafe, as you called it, the dead cafe.
Dead cafe. Dead cafe. I do think, and we have talked about this in previous episodes, that if there's going to be some kind of poltergeist activity, which in a way sounds a little bit like that, like haunting, poltergeisty, they do attach to teens. How old is Philip?
He's a teen.
See?
I don't know exactly what age he is, but I believe he's a teen.
And maybe a little vulnerable,
Maybe.
because he's unwell. So they just jumped right in.
The family then decided it was probably best to send Philip away. So they sent him off to live with relatives. And when he left, it said that Philip stopped hearing the voices and seeing the spirits. But the family, who were left behind, were at their wits' end. They were still seeing all this shit.
Oh, my God.
So they contacted infamous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren.
So funny. I thought you were going to say Ghostbusters.
No, not them, because that's fictional. But Ed and Lorraine Warren, if they sound familiar to you, it's because they were famous, like I said, paranormal investigators, and they kind of star in a bunch of movies, which I'll go on to tell you more about in a minute. They also called a priest as well who came to do an exorcism, but I'll tell you more about this later. But just to go off on a bit of a segue about Ed and Lorraine, they performed an exorcism on the house. But like I said, you may have heard of them because the horror franchise, I believe, is called The Conjuring. I've never seen any of the films. There's 100 of them, and Ed and Lorraine are actual people in it. Like they star in it.
What's it called?
The Conjuring. And I'll tell you more about it because you don't know clearly, and neither do I much. But they were based out of Connecticut, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed was a demonologist, a lecturer and an author, and Lorraine was a clairvoyant and a medium. So together they were a power couple when it comes to paranormal. So they would join investigations such as the Snedecker families and spend weeks in the home just to get the full demonic experience. And in 1952, going way back, I didn't do the top 3 because I don't think it was invented then, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, which is the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They were among the first investigators to the Amityville haunting and claimed to have investigated well over 10,000 cases during their career. And you'll have heard of all the cases because they've all been turned into various films, especially the Conjuring ones, such as Annabelle, the Haunted Doll. This case was based on one from 1970 where 2 roommates claimed their Raggedy Ann doll was possessed by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins, and the Warrens took the doll, telling the roommates it had been manipulated by an inhuman presence, and they then took the doll and put it on display at their occult museum, which was run out of the back of their house.
Ka-ching.
Then in 1971, the Perron family was haunted in their Rhode Island home by a witch who had lived there in the early 19th century, according to the Warrens. And then there was their involvement in the Amityville case, which was documented in several books and movies, in particular, author Jay Anson's 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, which I'm sure Jen has on her bookshelves.
Yes, and I'm sure it had a black cover with red and silver foil on, like they all did back then.
If you don't know about the Amityville, which we have talked about on this podcast before, it details the paranormal experiences of the Lutz family, who moved into this house on Ocean Avenue in 1975, a year after it had been the site of a family annihilation by the teenaged son of that family, Ronald DeFeo Jr., and this story, by the way, has since been debunked by many, many sources.
Right.
But then, Michelle, I want to just mention our favourite story of all, the stories that we've ever done on this podcast, the Enfield poltergeist. They were also involved, they say, because they did a version of it on The Conjuring. They've got it on their CV, but they weren't really major players in the case. As you probably know, it was Guy Playfair and Maurice Grosse who were the investigators in that particular story, or case, and they turned up at the scene uninvited and then were refused admittance by parapsychologist Guy Playfair, who said...
Back off.
He said basically, back off. Ed Warren apparently said to Guy Playfair that they could make a lot of money out of this case.
Oh.
But Guy said nobody in the family had ever heard of Ed Warren until they turned up. And then later, in 1981, Anna Cheyenne Johnson was accused of killing his landlord, and Ed and Lorraine Warren had already been called out to the house before the murder took place because of a demonic possession of the younger brother of Anna Cheyenne Johnson's fiancé. Confusing, I know, sorry. The Warrens, when they did their investigations, decided that Johnson was also possessed. So after the murder, he tried to plead not guilty by reason of demonic possession, but this didn't fly.
No, of course not, because bullshit.
Then this was made into a movie called The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, in 2021. The Warrens were plagued by accusations of extramarital affairs, with a minor in Ed's case, and physical abuse between the couple. As such, they were keen to get a contract in place for all of these films that they featured in to make sure that they were never depicted as having extramarital affairs or being ungodly in any way, because they were big God fans. They actually said that demonic forces were likely to possess those who lacked faith. And also there was the effect it would have on their business, because this is their career.
I told you, when they had that Raggedy Ann doll, ka-ching.
Ka-ching. Yeah, that doll is in a load of different things and franchises.
Yeah.
But we're going to return back to 1986 and the Snedecker family now, because Ed and Lorraine Warren turned up and proclaimed the Snedecker family house to be infested with demons. So, like I said, they performed the exorcism, but it clearly didn't work, because in 1988, a priest then performed another exorcism on the house, and the family then claimed that the paranormal activity that had plagued them for 2 years and all the one up the bum, no harm done by the ghosties just suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
So later that year, they moved out of the house and never returned.
Oh.
But then they went to the press about their experiences before they left, which it did invite some skepticism, as you can imagine, Michelle.
Of course it fucking did.
So back to the Hartford Courant, as you like to call it. I don't know what you say. It's obviously the local Connecticut paper for the area. Landlord Darrell Kern said in a 1992 article that he noticed this paranormal activity seemed to escalate when the family was behind on the rent.
Oh.
And he said, it's a scheme to make money.
Right.
A neighbour of the family, Catherine Ultimus, they also believed the whole thing was a hoax and said in the same article, I think they planned it right from when they moved in. And she goes on to say that the family always appeared jovial whenever they were outside the house and not acting like a terrified family. Then friends of Philip had piped up saying that they doubted the family's claims because it didn't fit from what they knew of Philip's personality. And one of his friends also told the paper he was a storyteller. He always had to be the centre of attention.
But they did send their kid away who was sick.
Yeah,
it's
they
not
did.
Very nice.
So a resident of the house after the Snedeckers left is called Susan Trotter Smith, said in 2009, we've lived in this house for 10 years. Our house is wonderful. This is all Hollywood foolishness. The stories are all
bullshit.
Ludicrous, she said. And an author by the name of Ray Garton interviewed the Warrens and the Snedeckers for his book In a Dark Place, which is all about the haunting. If you'd like to go and check it out, Michelle will link it up. He noted that the family's stories weren't tallying when he spoke to different members.
Right.
So he went to Ed Warren, who said this. Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story. Just use what works and make the rest up. Just make it up and make it scary.
Oh, my God. So it's all bullshit.
Bullshit.
Holy
And
shit.
that's the story of the Snedeckers.
So it's basically a big hoax.
Yeah.
Shit.
I think so. I don't know what other people think, but there is some that still believe the Snedeckers had experienced what they did experience. And because I haven't immersed myself in it as much as I have, say, the Enfield Haunting, which I do believe certainly that something happened because there were eyewitnesses to a lot of the events that occurred at the Enfield Haunting.
Yeah.
If you don't know about it, have a little look through our back catalogue and maybe go look at, there's a great miniseries starring Timothy Spall, which I loved.
Well, thank you so much for that story.
Thank you.
Great stuff. I'll link it up and I'm going to look into it because often people will either wholeheartedly jump in and believe something or it's a hoax. It's quite extreme. I think people are all in or it's bullshit.
Well, it's what they thought about the Amityville situation as well. The Lutz family trying to cash in on the fact that there was a dreadful murder the year before in their home and they tried to cash in on it. Possibly. That's what was said. I haven't Googled it enough to know for sure. So there was a bit of a spate of that going on around that time, if you see what I mean. So it could have been a little bit of, in the air, a bit of a trend.
I looked up in the sky and I just thought, I don't know what that is, but I know what I saw. Don't tell me it was a weather balloon. Don't tell me it was some kind of wolf. It wasn't. I know what I saw.
I've got something that could also be on that. Is it real? Is it a hoax? I think we might have touched on this story many episodes ago. But to be honest, I looked through our apps. I couldn't find it. So fuck it. This week, I'm going to look at a supernatural story that happened in one of the best decades ever, the 70s. I love the 80s, but the 70s is a good one. It's a good one.
You keep changing your favourite decade, Michelle.
But you know what? I love the 70s and the 80s. 80s is probably the best, followed by the 70s. So we're going to jump in. My dad's Holden ute.
Are we having to hide in the back of your dad's ute with a blanket over the top of us because it's illegal for us to ride in it without seatbelts?
Yes. I mean, there were no seatbelts in the front of Dad's ute. It was one of those bench seats that had no seatbelts. So there would be four of us kids sliding around because it was vinyl and you just slip and slide. And in the summer, you just burn the back of your legs. We're getting in Dad's Holden ute. Or if you're my fiancé, who was recently in Australia, he called it a utie, which is very cute.
I can understand why. It's very cutie.
Very cutie to call it a utie. And we are zipping off back to February 1977 to a place called Broadhaven in Pembrokeshire.
In Wales?
In Wales, yes. I'm going to dip into the charts from that year. It's packed full of delight. So I went to Wikipedia to see the top number ones of 1977. Yep. Biggest song of the year? Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. Exactly.
Barbara Dixon.
By a woman I've never fucking heard of. No, Julie Covington.
Julie Covington. Yeah, she's one of those women who is a darling of the stage and screen, mostly stage, I think. She was one of, who's the guy that wrote that? Tim Rice and who's the other guy? Julian Lloyd Webber. She's one of his stars. I think she was also in Starlight Express.
Okay, that makes sense.
So like Barbara Dixon, Elaine Page.
Stage singers. Next is completely different. It's not the way that you do it, but how you do it to me.
Uh-huh.
By Pussyfoot. Yes. So that was number 2. Big song.
Pussyfoot. That's a terrible name.
It's a foot in the pussy. Anyway.
Stop it. Why would you go there?
Because it's a pussyfoot.
A foot in the pussy.
It's a pussyfoot.
But we know that's not what it means. Pussyfoot around means you're
tiptoeing.
Trying to tiptoe. Yeah.
Number 3, I Want to Be Your Everything by Andy Gibb. Ha, ha.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. And then some song called That's Rock and Roll by Sean Cassidy. Don't know that.
Oh, I loved Sean Cassidy.
Oh, really? So maybe you know
Which
that
one
song.
was he? No, I don't know any of the songs. I was too young, but he was gorgeous. He was in the Hardy Boys. Yeah.
All right, I'll link that up. Then this is a classic by Peter Allen.
Oh.
When my baby
flies to me, I go to Rio.
That's it.
De Janeiro. Those big sleeves.
The next one, Torn Between Two Lovers.
Torn between two lovers. Is that Olivia Newton-John?
Mary McGregor.
Oh,
Never heard of her. Then you'll know this one. Walk Right In, Dr. Hook.
Sit right down, baby, let your hair hang down.
That's the one. Then I think this might be my favourite of the whole top 10. You're moving out today. Pick up your rubber duck. I'd like to wish you luck.
Oh, rubber duck. I didn't know the words. La 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 la.
But there was always a line in there which, as a kid, I didn't understand. As an adult, she sang some line that was like, "The baker told me what you do with bread. What did he do?"
Well, what did he do with bread?
It's up to your imagination, Geordie. What was he doing with that loaf of bread?
The vicar told me.
The baker.
What you do with bread.
The baker told me.
Oh, the baker.
The baker told me what you do with bread.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to think a little longer about that one.
And then the last one. If you leave me now.
Take away a little part of me.
Chicago.
Ooh, don't.
Exactly.
Please don't go.
What a year.
I know all those
I know,
songs.
it's because they were all over the radio. Loved 1977 with a bullet rip snorter.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe. Going back to Wales. I'm going to give you a little overview of this day. Friday, February 4th, 1977. Broadhaven. It's a tiny, tiny village.
I know it.
How do you know it?
Because I got a friend who lives there.
Fucking hell. You had a friend who lived in a village last week, 2 weeks ago.
It's crazy,
God, you've
isn't
got
it?
friends everywhere.
It's actually not Broadhaven, it's Milford Haven. I think it's nearby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So at that time in 77, there were like 856 people. Tiny.
I've also been there on holiday around there, Pembrokeshire.
have
I love it.
you?
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Oh,
when
yeah,
the
I
sun
bet.
shines, it's beautiful.
And when it doesn't, it's fucking
It's
shithole.
shit.
Yeah. So this was a cold, rainy day because we're in February 4th, Friday. And 15 kids, mainly a bunch of 10-year-old boys, saw what they say was a shiny cigar-shaped UFO that was just parked in a field behind their school during lunch. Whatever they thought they saw, it's not in the sky, but just sitting in the field.
Parked.
Yep. Now, I've read that it was raining at the time and the boys were out in the field playing footy when one of them saw something strange that was kind of partially hidden by trees and shrubs. So not immediately obvious. Two of the boys say they saw a silver object with a silver dome on top that had a flashing light on the top of that. 6 of the boys said they saw that and also a tall man dressed in a silver spacesuit standing next to the UFO. So at first I think these kids were just curious about what they were seeing in the wooded part of the field because it's weird.
Yeah.
But then, according to reports I've read, they got a bit freaked out by what they were seeing and ran back to the school to tell their teacher what was out there. But of course the teacher was like, "Okay, kids, calm down. There's no spaceship out there. Get in your seats." And he just brushed over what they were telling him and just carried on with the day's lessons. Except they were insisting that they had seen a spaceman. And the teacher just thought, these kids are trying to prank me. But they were pretty serious about it, but no one would believe them.
Well, it's the 70s, so it could have even been a pervert and they wouldn't have given a shit.
A guy flashed his dick at you?
Whatever. Come on, it's mathematics time. Pop quiz.
And so after school, these kids were just like, blah, blah, blah. I saw a spaceman. I saw a spaceship. To anyone who'd listen. Friends, parents, everyone. Until finally, some of the parents actually thought, I think my kids are telling me the truth that they at least saw something. That night, the parents of most of the kids got together and went to the local police station to report the incident. Like I said before, it's a Friday. The kids have their weekend. And on the Monday, the school teacher hears that they've gone to the police with this spaceship story. So he says to the kids involved, "Drawing time, I want you to draw what you saw." And they all basically drew the same thing. I say that, but in some reports, the kids say they saw a cigar-shaped UFO. But actually, when I looked at the drawings, because I did see them, most of them drew a saucer-shaped UFO with a dome on top.
Oh, right. So there was some inconsistencies.
But I think a cigar lying on its side could look like a saucer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So maybe it's a perspective thing. Then I read a piece in the Mail Online where they spoke to a guy called David Davies.
Is he now a politician?
At that school. No, he's not.
Because we've got a Tory politician called David Davies.
No, not the same one. He didn't see the UFO, is what all his friends thought. But he says of that day, the day itself was absolutely miserable. It was dreary, it was drizzly, it was cold, it was horrible. I've never been a great lover of getting cold and wet, so I was inside reading books. However, David kept getting interrupted by kids running into school going, I saw a UFO. So he decided, I'm going to go into the field and see what the hell's out there. Quote, I've got one leg over the fence and this thing just came up from behind a group of trees.
What?
It was silver, cigar-shaped, and about 45 feet long. I watched it for what couldn't have been any longer than about 10 seconds before, for some reason, I got the urge to run away.
Oh.
He then said he did not discuss what he'd seen with the other boys on their way home because all the other kids were like, spaceship, spaceship. Now, there's a guy called Dr. David Clark, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Media Arts and Communication at Sheffield Hallam University in the UK. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because we did talk about him in the Calvine UFO episode, because he's been all up in looking at this kind of stuff for the government as well as for personal interest. From 2009 to 2013, he was commissioned by the government, actually by the Ministry of Defence, as a curator for a special project that involved the transfer of 210 surviving files from the Ministry of Defence's archives into the public domain.
Oh.
And part of this were the drawings from those kids.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, loads of those drawings from that day were sent to the Ministry of Defence for analysis. The originals were preserved in a scrapbook at the school, and the Ministry of Defence got some originals, some copies. Now, the archive that Dr. Clark was working on included an account from the school diary written in the third person by the head teacher of the school called Ralph Llewellyn. He apparently interviewed 15 of the kids separately on the Monday, 7th of February, and examined their drawings and notes. And he says the drawings are remarkably similar. However, it's worth noting that although the drawings were done independently by all the kids, Geordie, it's 3 days later.
Right.
There could be a case here for saying that, you know, the kids had the whole weekend to get together, maybe discuss what they'd seen, maybe misremember, it's not as fresh. However, the head teacher, Mr. Llewellyn, did come to the conclusion that he thought, in his opinion, the kids were telling the truth. And he thought the kids were not really able to pull off a sophisticated, sustained hoax without one of them cracking and saying, it's all a prank or whatever. So he says he thinks they did see something that they hadn't seen before. And he says he doesn't know what it was and he's prepared to keep an open mind on the subject. Now, David Davies, the kid who had his leg over the fence, says there was absolutely no possibility of him and his classmates collaborating on some story over the weekend before they did these sketches, because he says, quote, "This was the 1970s in rural Pembrokeshire. We didn't have iPads, no mobile phones. If you were lucky enough to have a home phone, any conversation would be very short at your parents' insistence, and they would be listening."
For sure.
So he says it's impossible that they had the means to all get together and plan what they were going to draw. You know, he says basically what they saw was beyond their comprehension.
Yeah, wow.
Like I said, these drawings, they do look similar. So I do think the kids did see something and that they did all see the same thing. Whether it was a UFO with an alien, who knows? But loads of people, of course, want to think that it was all just a hoax. And I did read one comment on Dr. Clark's website that I found really interesting, because there was all this speculation that the kids were influenced by Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
The movie.
That came out that year, yeah. But it hadn't been released yet.
And these kids are how old again? 8, 9?
No, they're 15.
Oh, okay.
15-year-old boys.
Right.
Look, unless they'd seen a trailer, probably a movie trailer at the movies, and I don't know where these kids would go to the movies out in rural Pembrokeshire, but it doesn't really make sense because like I said, hadn't been released yet. But there were other things that could have influenced the imaginations of those kids. So back in the 60s and 70s, when, green screen and CGI and AI didn't exist, all those sci-fi movies had to use actual models and sets. And you look back now and they all look a bit shit. But in those days, it all would have looked quite amazing. And there were loads of films in the cinema and on the telly that were that kind of old sci-fi look. And apparently, according to user Count Otto Black, he says, quote, when they did get an airing, he's talking about these movies, it was usually in the form of a short season on the BBC, which, because this was before video recorders, it was heavily advertised well in advance so the sci-fi buffs wouldn't miss it. And he goes on to say, in 1977, I was about the same age as some of those kids in that picture, and I remember how us kids, especially the boys, used to eagerly anticipate forthcoming sci-fi classic movies which will be shown again for at least 2 or 3 years. And I mention all this because, on a hunch, I checked the Radio Times archive, and you might be interested to know that Forbidden Planet was aired as the first film in a 3-week mini-series at 7:25 p.m. on Wednesday the 17th of February 1977. And that's 13 days before the Broadhaven sighting. Since the film was going to be shown on a Wednesday evening, trailers would certainly have had to be shown on the preceding Wednesdays. Since the UFO was reported on a Thursday, it was actually a Friday, I suggest there was a high probability that some of these children had seen a trailer containing the most exciting imagery from Forbidden Planet the previous day.
Okay.
Which would have almost certainly have included the scene where a flying saucer lands on Altair IV.
4. Perhaps it says Altair 4.
Altair 4. Okay, IV 4. One before V, which is 5. Yes. Very good. You know your Roman numerals. Well done. Basically what he's saying is that the boys saw a trailer, got all excited, and then
got influenced by what they saw, and perhaps they did see something unusual in the sky. It could have been anything, and their imagination filled in the blanks. I can't help but feel that it's very similar to my story in the way that the Snedecker family may have thought, well, those Amityville Lutzes made a shit ton of money by saying that their house was haunted, and maybe there was some evidence that their house was previously a mortuary, and they thought, let's make up a massive story and back it up and get some cash.
Well, these kids didn't get any cash.
No, they didn't, because they're kids. They probably were in it for the excitement factor rather than the monetary factor, you know?
Well, apparently a hoaxer did later admit to wandering around in a firefighting suit after the children's sighting. So break that down. It's after the kids said they saw something.
Oh.
But also that doesn't explain the spaceship, so I think that's a bit weird. Also in the drawings, there's one kid who gave his spaceman alien pointy ears.
Right.
And we all know who had pointy ears from back in those days.
Yoda?
Spock from Star Trek.
Oh, right, yes.
Maybe there is something to this idea that the kids...
Being influenced by movies, TV, books, stories.
Now, thing is, Geordie, the Broadhaven sighting is just one of loads of sightings that happened all around the same time in that area. And they've been dubbed the Difford, D-Y-F-E-D, triangle, in reference to the Bermuda Triangle. On the afternoon of Wednesday, 16th of February, 1977, not quite 2 weeks after the Broadhaven incident, 9 kids aged between 8 and 11 from, I don't know how you say this, Rosybol School in Anglesey, North
How do you
Wales.
spell it?
R-H-O-S-Y-B-O-L.
No.
No, just no. No.
I do know that Llewellyn, any double L's is a cl.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
No
in
double L's
Welsh.
here. No. These kids said they saw a UFO. And their teacher, Mayor Williams, told the Western Mail it was a really bright afternoon and the object was flying very high towards Bull Bay.
Ooh.
So she saw it too. And she says, I took the children back into the school, separated them, and then told them to draw what they'd seen. It was really astonishing. Their drawings were all similar. I never believed in these things until I saw this.
That's incredible.
Now, those drawings and letters and notes from the kids were also sent to the Ministry of Defence. And there's one handwritten account from a 10-year-old girl called Gwar, G-W-A-W-R, Gwawar.
No idea.
Gwawara Jones, who jotted down her UFO experience for the RAF Valley in North Wales. And this note says, We were playing at netball.
Right.
With Mrs. Williams in the yard, and she was showing us how to throw the ball into the air when I saw an object high in the sky. I shouted at the others, and they looked up and saw it. It had a black dome on top and a silver cigar-shaped base. They're all saying the same thing here. She says it was travelling smoothly across the sky in a northerly direction.
Golly.
Northerly? I think this is quite sophisticated language.
For a kid.
And then she said... Yeah, she says, it remained in our sight for about 3 minutes. Then it went behind the only cloud in the sky and reappeared again for about 1 minute, then disappeared.
Sorry, that cloud just gave me a throwback to Nope.
Yes, I know. I was thinking the same thing. And if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, it's called Nope, Not Dope.
Yeah, great film.
So the Ministry of Defence are obviously collecting all this information. Then... 2 months later, a woman called Rosa Granville, who ran the Haven Fort Hotel in Little Haven, which is near Broadhaven, she says she saw something in the field next to the hotel that looked like an upside-down saucer. And she saw 2 faceless humanoid creatures with pointed heads.
Oh!
And she says so much heat came off this UFO that her face felt burned.
Oh, my goodness.
She said there were flames of all colours coming off it. These creatures came out of the flames. And then she said when she went to the field to have a look the following day, she said there were 2 inches of burned ground.
Oh, my gosh.
So obviously Rosa was freaked the fuck out by what she'd seen. So she called Lieutenant Cowan, who was at the time an officer from RAF Geordie, who checked in on Rosa and took a look at that field. And he says... he found no evidence of a landing. And then he told the media, which is kind of mean because he's taking the piss. He says, should a UFO arrive at RAF Geordie, we will charge the normal landing fees. Ho, ho. Oh, what a card.
What a jolly jape.
Now, he says he thought there could be a local prankster at work and that the description of the spaceman by Rosa and these kids fitted exactly the type of protection suit that would have been issued in the event of a fire at one of the local oil refineries.
Okay.
Add to this that in 1996, a local businessman called Glyn Edwards admitted that he had wandered around the area in a silver suit in 1977 as a prank, but it was after the first kids at Broadhaven had said they'd seen something.
Right, that he did the silver suit prank. Right.
Exactly. Now, the UK National Archives also released files which kind of indicate that they also think it's all a bit of the work of hoaxes. I don't know. Because they also thought the school kids at Broadhaven could have confused a sewerage tank for a UFO.
Well, you know.
However, Geordie, these kids... a lot of them
saw
were
it
from
move.
farming backgrounds and
Yeah.
they saw it move. So I'm sure they knew what a fucking sewerage tank looked like
Yeah.
and that this was not a sewerage tank.
Yeah, that's not quite doing it for me.
Poo-poo that.
Yeah, okay.
But like the Calvine UFO incident,
Yeah.
a former US Navy sailor has spoken out in the media in recent years saying that the figure in the silver suit was in fact a member of US military personnel.
Oh.
And that the suit he's wearing is actually their standard fireproof uniform. And the UFOs were the new Harrier jets flying overhead.
Oh, right. Well, that makes more sense, doesn't it?
So that's where we're at with this case. And the reason that there's a lot of media attention about Broadhaven is because there's a new documentary called Paranormal: The Village That Saw Aliens,
Great.
which you can now watch on BBC iPlayer. And no, I did not have time to watch it, but I will. And BBC presenter Sean Ellery digs into this Broadhaven incident. I don't know what her conclusions are, but for me, I think it's probably a US Harrier jet that maybe had to emergency land or something. But I don't think it was aliens, even though these kids are really quite traumatized by it and insist that what they saw was a spaceship and aliens.
Incredible, Michelle. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I don't think we have talked about this before, but it does sound very similar to the West Hall incident where the children in Australia saw a UFO at the back of their school, and the one in Africa as well.
In Zimbabwe, which you talked about, yes. So there is a history of kids seeing stuff they don't know about and drawing things.
More of the above. I really enjoyed that story. I love hearing these things. And I feel sorry for the kids who do believe that they saw one thing and it might not necessarily have been that, or they may never discover the truth, which could be really frustrating.
Especially as some kids said they got quite bullied by
That
saying,
they saw what they saw. I know what I saw.
I saw a spaceship and an alien. I know what I saw. And that's not nice. And they're still talking about it nearly 50 years later.
Incredible. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Well, there we have it. A nice little pair of supernatural stories wrapped up in a tidy little bow. Because like I said, those two cases feel like the people in it have been influenced by, kind of swept up with a craze almost. You know, especially my story with the Amityville connection and of course, the Lorraine and Ed Warren connection. And then your story with all of these other schools and people seeing things and in a group and saying that they've seen something. But of course, it's always being debunked.
Yes.
Is it debunked? Should we be skeptical? I don't know. We should always ask questions. Is it the truth? We'll never know.
We will never know, but obviously the US military has been thrown into the mix once again. Those bloody Harrier jets caused a lot of mischief, if that's what it really is.
But there's no doubt there's secrets out there that we'll never really understand or be aware of. So what are we to do, us little humans who aren't worthy of knowing these things? We'll make shit up.
And of course, there's confirmation bias too.
Confirmation bias is definitely another thing, yes. And I'm going to confirm with you right now, Michelle, I have a bias because I believe that it's now the end of the podcast.
Well, I thought you were going to say, I'm going to confirm with you that there are only 3 things left to say.
Well, that would have been a better segue. Well done, Michelle.
What are those things, Geordie?
Wherever you are,
whatever you do,
just keep eavesdropping. 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 Eavesdropping.